Hello and welcome to this mini webinar on the Port Macquarie Small Debts Register, which covers the years 1845 to 1887. But first, an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, New South Wales State Archives acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. The Port Macquarie Small Debts Register covers the years 1845 to 1887 and was created by the Port Macquarie Court of Petty Sessions, which is equivalent to what we know as the local court today. So here is a picture of the Port Macquarie Courthouse, the very building in which this register would have been created and maintained for all of those years. What was a small debt? Well, a small debt was something that was outlined in legislation in 1846. And in that legislation, the Courts of Petty Sessions had the authority to recover debts of up to the value of £10, so a small debt. The sorts of things that they could recover debts on included goods sold, demand for 3 months' rent due, lodging, hire of horses, agistment, work and labour, so including servants' work and that of horses and carriages, wages due, money lent, unlawful detention of property, damage sustained by improper driving, assault or injury to the person or a family member, or the breaking and destroying of fences and injuries to cattle and land. Many courts throughout New South Wales, or all courts of petty sessions, would have had small debts registers. Some of those have survived and have come to us to the New South Wales State Archives collection. So some courts we have quite a bit of material from the 19th century, other courts not so much. And this is an example of a surviving record from the Port Macquarie Court of Petty Sessions. And this is also interesting to us today because it's been digitised and indexed by the Port Macquarie and District Family History Society before that information, the images plus the index, has been uploaded to our catalogue collection search for everyone to search. So the register itself, as I said, it covers the years 1845 to 1887, and it tells us information in one-line entries about each claim, and there's columns to break up that information. So we get things like the name of the plaintiff and the name of the defendant. What was the cause of the action? How much was the claim for? What were the costs and what was the judgment and how much was that judgment for? You might also get some information with later entries, including the date of the plaint, the nature of the summons, if there was a garnishee order issued and that kind of thing. And what's interesting about the small debts registers is that they're another lens to view relationships within the local community at the time. So things that were getting a little bit out of hand or weren't able to be resolved between neighbours or friends might end up at the local court for that extra authority to help get to that resolution. So the next thing we might do is just have a look at how to search for entries within the Port Macquarie Small Debts Register. And here we are in our catalogue collection search. So what I've done here is I've chosen a name, Horatio Tozer. I can see that there's 58 entries in the Small Debts Register for that particular name. I can also see that there's 58 entries for digitally available material for the name Horatio Tozer, which makes me think that that's probably all of the images that we have to do with him is to do with this small debts register. I can narrow down my search or filter my search to just look at entries from the small debts register by clicking here, and you'll have the option to include or exclude that particular index and just look at those things only. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, Horatio Tozer was a figure in Port Macquarie at the time, as you can see. He was a chemist in that area, and he had a son called Sir Horace Tozer, not obviously at his birth was he a Sir, but later on he became a Sir. And he also became a politician in Queensland. So he's quite well known in the latter part of the 19th and the early 20th century. He was born in 1844 and lived until 1916. So for the period that we're talking about today, he was a boy and growing up while his father was working as a chemist in Port Macquarie. And whether looking at his son just can also give us a picture of what Horatio himself might have looked like. So we can see here that we've got Horatio Tozer and Graham. What I'm going to do is just click on this first entry, and that will then allow us to view that entry itself, the document, in a closer way. So here we are, we've got the item detail page, and if I click on this thumbnail and open that up, then I will actually get to view the page from the register itself. So we can see this is May 1861, and we can see here the one-line entries and the columns going down to tell us who the people are and what the debts were for and things. Now, if I click over here, I can actually enlarge that image even more so I can see the writing more clearly. So that's what I've done in this next slide. So I've just clicked to open up a larger version of that image, and then I've zoomed in so I can view the writing quite clearly. So this first case here, Horatio Tozer versus Mrs. Roach, for goods sold, and we can see it's for £7.09. The second one is the one that we were looking for, Horatio Tozer versus Mrs. Graham, also for goods sold, £2.13. So when you think that he's a chemist and his customers, Mrs. Roach, Mrs. Graham, possibly purchased goods, medications, whatever, and then had difficulty actually paying for them afterwards, then he's resorted to the local court to try and recover that money. And then if we look at the other side of the page there, we can see that as the plaintiff, he won that case, and Mrs. Roach didn't actually appear in court. And the second matter, which was for a lot less money, £2, was actually settled out of court. So that's just that nice ending to that particular story there. We can also narrow down the searches a little bit by adding the year. So for Horatio Tozer, for example, there were 58 entries, which is a lot to get through, really. So what I've done in this example is narrowed down my search to 1 year, so just 1855. All I've done is just put that year into the search box up the top, and it will just only show now 1855 entries. I can see here that we have Horatio Tozer as the defendant in this instance, although most of the time that we've seen so far, he does seem to be the plaintiff. So let's have a look at this one, Robert Johnson versus Horatio Tozer. So I do all those same things again, and this time it's this entry here, Robert Johnson versus Horatio Tozer, and this time I think we've got order overpaid and £4.07 and 8. So I think it says overpaid, but you may have a different opinion as to that word. So it's a little bit difficult to read sometimes. Then if we just go to the next page, we're just going to talk about the project a little bit. So this particular small debts register was in dire need of conservation. So this is just a picture of what it looked like after conservation had their hands on it. So they took the binding off, the outside cover of the volume, and they do this often because the outside covers can start to bend and crack, and they can actually cause more damage to the information and the paperwork inside. And what they've done here is they've removed each section of the volume and put each section into a small folder and labelled each one so it stays in order, so we know which one comes first, and then that whole thing will be stored flat in a box, which is a much better way for the paperwork inside to be kept. So Port Macquarie and District Family History Society were quite interested in this register, and between us and the society, it was decided that the society would photograph and index this register, and then the resulting images and names would be loaded to our website, which is now exactly what's happened. So just another image from the register. You can see, as well as the pages, there was also documents interleaved into the volume as well. So there was quite a bit of stuff going on there. The first step of their project was to visit the reading room, and they photographed the register, the whole thing, over a course of days. I'm sure they will remember those days forever. And then they took the images home back to Port Macquarie, and members of the society worked together. There was a team with a project manager and an editor, and they worked together to index this register, which sounds quite simple, but as you go through indexing, questions always arise. Oh, is this right? Should I put this word? What do you think that word is? What do I do in an instance where there isn't a first name, or whether it's just got Mrs. or whatever? So you do need to have an editor and a project manager who makes those decisions and makes them consistent. So they got through all of that, and when they had finished indexing that record, the data plus the images were sent back to us, and we uploaded the images together with the names, and that is the index and the register that you see in Collection Search today. So we're so pleased that we've been able to work together with the Family History Society. It's been such a great time of collaboration between us and the society, and it was so great that they could do all of that work at home. They didn't have to keep coming down to Sydney from Port Macquarie to do that. And now that register is available for everyone all over the world to see and to access, to research, or even just to find a particular name in. And we're so keen also to support more of this kind of work into the future. So thank you so much for your time today. Have a lovely day.